Dreamworks has given us interesting stories, some that held a more serious tone and others that were just ridiculous. But the studio has also given us great father characters. So, in honor of Father's Day, we want to know which Dreamworks dads are a cut above the rest and which ones fall short. Hey guys, I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is Dreamworks Dads Good to Evil. For this list, we'll be ranking based on how well of a father figure these characters are. Dads that have performed a heroic feat will be given a higher ranking, while anyone that caused harm to befall their children will drop lower on our list. We'll be starting with the most pure and noble character and working our way down. These characters are the good. Taking the first spot as most good, we had the Viking chief, Stoic the Vast. He had a lot of expectations for Hiccup, always wanting his son to learn how to be a real Viking rather than working on his contraptions. But as much as Stoic wanted Hiccup to toughen up, he also sheltered his son and had to be persuaded by Gobber to let Hiccup join in on the classes to learn how to kill a dragon on his own.
He'd be killed before you let the first dragon out of its cage.
There are a few people out there who will no doubt claim that Stoic deserves a lower ranking, due to how he disowned his son before seeking out the dragon's nest. But we personally feel like Stoic more than made up for this judgment call. Since then, he saved his son from drowning, saved his dragon from drowning, apologized for his words, allowed the dragons to stay in Berk while trusting Hiccup to find solutions to any dragon-related issues, and followed Hiccup's lead on making new saddles and weapons for the dragon riders. Not to mention the greatest sacrifice in the films, rushing to save his son's life when he saw Toothless was being controlled and about to attack. There's no doubt that Stoic's death is one of the most tragic in all of Dreamworks. The silver medal of good goes to King Zuba. When Alex and his friends find themselves in Africa, the lion is reunited with his family that he couldn't remember being separated from. When he asked what had happened, Zuba and his wife revealed that he blamed himself for losing him to poachers, having been distracted with sparring with a rival. Zuba then tells of how he followed the poachers for days until he was forced to come to the conclusion that his son was already dead before returning home. Having Alex alive and well, Zuba showed nothing but love and pride for his son, even when he didn't understand the idea of being king of New York or why Alex was able to make a living dancing around. He gave up his place as ruler of the animals that had come to rely on him because he couldn't stand the thought of banishing his own child. And when they were nearly killed by the tourists that were left in the wilderness, Zuba saw firsthand how Alex was praised by them, accepting his son's different way of doing things and even picking up a few tricks. We're giving the bronze to Poe's adoptive father, Mr. Ping. Mr. Ping had come across Poe by accident after finding the small panda hidden away with the vegetables that he bought. Even though he knew that it would be a challenge to raise a panda, he just rolled with it. So well that Poe never questioned Mr. Ping being his father, until he had finally got old enough to notice the key differences between them. When Lee showed up, Mr. Ping was understandably defensive, demanding to know where Lee had been and how could they trust that Lee was really Poe's father. The heartbreak on Mr. Ping's face was clear when he felt like he was being left behind, stating that he was already proud of his son. When Poe left for the panda village, Mr. Ping came along to make sure his son was taken care of, and even eventually warmed up to Lee, stating Poe needed both of his dads to be there.
He needs both his dads.
The next spot goes to the genius dog, Mr. Peabody. While overwhelming with his standards for everything, he loved Sherman and only wanted the best for him. After finding Sherman abandoned, it would have been easy for Peabody to just let Sherman go up for adoption, but instead, he fought to raise the child himself. Peabody tried to teach Sherman everything he knew, from painting to fencing to history, and credited Sherman as being the inspiration for the invention of the time machine, the way back. The only time Peabody lost his composure was when he saw Miss Grunion trying to drag Sherman away, and Peabody lashed out and bit her. Next is Jethro from The Prince of Egypt. Two things are clear during the movie: he adores his daughters and shares what he has with others.
And tonight, you shall be my honored guest.
When Moses showed up to their small village, Jethro didn't see why Moses held no value for himself. He was proud to see his daughter finally find a husband that she would be happy with, and instilled in his younger daughters to always be charitable and welcoming, regardless of status, as seen with how they warm up to Moses. Next is Master Shifu. Shifu took in Tai Lung and was labeled as a father to him. But we would also argue that Shifu was a fatherly figure to other fighters. He helped Tigress control her strength and anger when playing with the other children at the orphanage before letting her live at the Jade Palace. He's strict, but also gives praise where it's due when it comes to the rest of the Furious Five. When Shifu trained Po, he used what he was able to learn and observe, knowing how to motivate Po to become the Dragon Warrior, and we can't deny how difficult it was to see Shifu face Tai Lung, admitting that he was unable to see what the other warrior was turning into.
I loved you too much to see what you were becoming.
Next, we have Po's biological father, Lee. It's hard not to feel bad for Lee. The man spent years thinking he lost his wife and son before Oogway's message reached him, and there's something to be said for how he went out on his own to find Po, regardless of the danger that was likely still lingering for pandas. Lee lured Po home on false pretenses, but we can't say that we blame him. He was finally reunited with Po, only to see his son engage in a fight with some odd villain made of jade. Fighting was already a foreign concept to Lee since the village was peaceful, save for when they were attacked all those years ago. It makes sense that Lee would want to get his son away from a dangerous situation, even if it meant lying to him about teaching him how to use his chi.
I am not going to lose you again.
We also give Lee a lot of bonus points for urging the pandas to use their chi again to help Po in the other realm as he fought Kai. With that said, we've arrived at the neutral territory. These characters fall in the gray area. Next is King Dimas from Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas. He doesn't care for Sinbad or the pirate life, but he did trust his son. So when Proteus insisted Sinbad could be trusted to retrieve the Book of Peace, Dimas reluctantly allowed Proteus to take Sinbad's place in imprisonment, on the surface anyway. When Dimas shows up again, he had wrangled a team to sneak Proteus out of his cell and as far from Syracuse as possible. We can at least give Dimas some credit for trying to save his son's life.
I won't let them execute you for Sinbad's crime.
It's understandable why he didn't trust Sinbad, or any pirate really, and it would be hard to believe that a goddess stole the Book of Peace, even if it was a goddess of chaos, especially when Eris covered her tracks by disguising as Sinbad and leaving his knife at the scene. Next, we have the chatterbox, Donkey. The expression goes, a face only a mother could love, but Donkey adored his kids, regardless of how odd a mix Dragon and Donkey was, or how much of a fire hazard they were. And we aren't too surprised he made for an affectionate dad. After all, Donkey was a level-headed one of the group. Though he was silly and had some odd solutions, he was still loyal and patient. And during Shrek's misadventure, after Rumpelstiltskin sent him to a world where he and Fiona don't fall in love, there's no denying the way Donkey's face lit up at being informed he was a dad with half-dragon babies. There's fewer things purer than that. Plus, we want to mention the odd mix of the role Donkey took of dad and uncle when it came to Arthur, explaining that Shrek was protecting the boy by lying about why he was there in front of Charming. Following after his friend is Shrek. He was unsure about having kids when Fiona revealed she was pregnant, but we don't think that makes him a bad dad. After hearing some of the stories about how his own father was trying to eat him, we understand. Not to mention that Shrek also brought up being afraid his children wouldn't be accepted because of how long he was the angry ogre in the woods. After all, Fiona was half human, and while the kids might have been ogres themselves, they would have been treated differently by other people once the other kids learned about their home life. But Shrek was able to come around after having to deal with Arthur, realizing that though he may screw up, the important part of parenting was to be there. By the time his kids are born, Shrek is able to roll with it and learn how to have fun and be the nurturing caregiver he wished he had growing up. However, we knock him a little low on the list because, like with Donkey, we don't really get to see many interactions between him and his children. Next is Mr. Malone from Flushed Away. He isn't shown for long, but we learn a lot about him in his time interacting with Rodney and the family. At first, he mistakes Rodney as being a boyfriend and teases Rodney about making an honest woman of Rita over dinner.
Are you going to make an honest woman of my daughter?
When Rita explains that her companion is from the surface and was offering to pay to get him home, Mr. Malone is concerned. Not just because of the journey, but because of the rats that patrol the sewers. Being in a full-body cast, he's not able to perform much as far as heroic feats go, but he was quick to scold his son, who suggested they simply turn Rodney in for the reward money, stating he was not going to allow his son to act like a rat. Next, we're ranking a couple of dads together from Over the Hedge. Lou the Porcupine and Ozzy the Possum. They follow Vern's lead when it comes to foraging, trusting the turtle's instinct up until RJ shows up after they discover the hedge. We rank them a little lower for following RJ's lead without question, persuaded when they feel like the raccoon had the know-how to take food from the surrounding housing development. They even allowed their children to take part in helping to forage from the humans. But that didn't mean they loved their kids any less. One of the most memorable moments in the film was when Ozzy thought his daughter was dead, grieving over her before praising her on finally playing dead as he had been trying to get her to do.
I thought you were dead.
I learned from the best, Dad.
Finally, we've reached the dark side. These characters are the bad and the evil. Next on our list is the ever-critical Seti I. Father to both Ramses and Moses, he's shown during the beginning of The Prince of Egypt. In this version of events, the pharaoh is aware that Moses isn't his son through birth like Ramses is, but he raised Moses like he would his other child. The pharaoh placed far more expectation on his oldest son, as Ramses was meant to take the throne, which is why he demanded so much of the family, wanting them to always be at their best. Having a parent that is overbearing and doesn't allow their offspring to enjoy their childhood is harsh. But we give them some leniency to the pharaoh since they weren't simply rulers to the people of Egypt. They were seen as gods, and so had to show their best to the public and strive to be without fault. We can give the pharaoh some credit for hearing Moses out when he suggested Ramses just needed a way to prove himself. Next is Don Lino from Shark's Tale. When it came to Frankie and Lenny, he had a clear favorite.
He's beautiful. He does what he's supposed to do.
He wanted Lenny to learn to not be a pushover and to adjust to eating fish and other sea life, not understanding why Lenny was fighting it so hard. He made it clear that he didn't want his son to be walked over once they took over the family business, which is understandable. Don Lino was in clear grief after Frankie was killed and was stuck believing that a similar fate had befallen his only other son. We grant him leeway for taking his grief out on the fish that was bragging about killing the two heirs to the mob family. In the end, he reluctantly accepted Lenny, as it was better than not having a son in his life at all. Next is Fiona's father and the king of far, far away, King Harold. Many can already guess as to why he's so low on this list. After all, not many dads in movies featuring princesses nowadays are known for simply locking their daughters away in a dragon's keep, waiting for someone to come along, sweep them up, and marry them. Not only that, but Harold had agreed to it as a way of pleasing the fairy godmother after she turned him into a human, so he could pursue Lillian. When he met Shrek, he could have just learned to accept the relationship, but instead, he tried to get his daughter's husband killed.
Fiona's father paid you to do this?
And when that didn't work, he attempted to trick Fiona into marrying Charming. We'll give him credit for stepping up in the end. He stood up to the fairy godmother and saved Shrek from her wrath, helping to give his daughter the happy ending that she deserved. We still had to drop him low, since this was after a lifetime of teaching Fiona to be ashamed of becoming an ogre at night. Had she grown up being accepted, things would likely have been a lot easier for her. But that's a whole rant on its own. It was a tough call, but we feel we have to give a low spot to the next father on our list, Jacob from Joseph, King of Dreams. Though not as popular as the Prince of Egypt, this also tells a story of someone from the Bible. In this film, Jacob sets things up to not work in Joseph's favor, which is the exact opposite of what he was trying to do. He taught Joseph how to read and write in Egyptian, spending days having Joseph study rather than work the fields. While we can see the value of teaching Joseph more than hard labor, Jacob was well aware of the rift he was creating between his sons.
God sent you a vision of the future.
Though he didn't mean to, his coddling of Joseph is what led to the other sons being jealous and eventually selling Joseph off into slavery. And as Jacob had been lied to, led to believe Joseph was eaten by wolves, he repeated the mistake when Benjamin was born, insisting the youngest son was to never leave his side. Next is Barry's dad, Martin Benson. Like his wife, he was demanding about getting Barry to pick a career, but it was shown in the movie that Martin was not the best listener. He wanted Barry to follow in his footsteps as a stirrer and wasn't interested in hearing about how the humans were using their honey. When Barry kept fighting the humans in court, Martin was reluctant to get involved and didn't make much of an impact. We don't think he meant to be malicious, but he wasn't exactly supportive of his son striving to think outside the box and make a difference, which is surprising. Why wouldn't you want your child to fight for what they thought was right? The gold medal for most evil daddy-o goes to Ramses II. Raised alongside Moses, he was the far more responsible of the duo, wanting more than anything to be a proud ruler like his father. Moses deciding to leave tore him up. and seeing his brother return was bittersweet, as it was followed by Moses demanding the slaves to be set free. Rather than take Moses seriously, he brushed off the warnings and pleas and went about his daily life, his young son still at his side. As the plague worsened, causing starvation and illness, Ramses stayed stubborn, as he was above the worst of it due to his status.
Ramesses, you bring this upon yourself.
But the final plague was one that robbed him of his son. Though we understand Ramses' side of things, we had to place him in our bottom ranking. Had he not been stubborn, he could have saved his son's life. Alright guys, that's the list. Who do you think is the best Dreamworks dad? Let us know in the comment section. Don't forget to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.